Rachel Moore had exactly 12 hours to find a husband and a home, or she would lose her daughter forever. Standing in the rain outside a roadside diner at midnight, staring at the legal papers that had just destroyed her world, she knew the truth. No miracle was coming. Her ex-husband had won. Sophie would be gone by noon. But inside that diner, a stranger eating pie with his own daughter had heard every word of her phone call with the lawyer, and he was about to make the most reckless decision of his life. Because Ethan Brooks knew exactly what it felt like to fight alone for a child, and he wasn't going to let another parent lose that battle without a fight. Before we dive into the story of desperation, courage, and an impossible choice that changed two broken families forever, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this opening grabbed you, hit that like button, so I know you're here for the whole journey. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights of the Silver Creek Diner buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly glow over the cracked vinyl booths and chipped formica tables. Rachel Moore stood behind the counter, her hands trembling as she refilled the same coffee pot for the third time. Not because it needed refilling, but because she needed something to hold on to before she fell apart completely. Her phone sat face up on the counter beside the register, the screen still glowing with the call that had just ended. 12 hours. That's all she had. 12 hours to produce documentation of stable housing and proof of a two-parent household, or Sophie would be gone. "Ma'am, could I get a refill when you have a chance?" Rachel's head snapped up. The man in booth 7 was looking at her with concern, not impatience. She hadn't even realized she'd been standing there, frozen, staring at nothing. "Of course, I'm so sorry." She grabbed the coffee pot with both hands to keep it steady and walked over to his table. Ethan Brooks had been watching the waitress for the last 20 minutes, ever since her phone had rung, and her whole body had gone rigid. He'd seen that look before. The kind of fear that turned people into statues. The kind that made breathing feel impossible. His daughter Lucy sat across from him, coloring on the kids' menu with intense concentration, oblivious to the quiet tragedy unfolding across the diner. As Rachel poured his coffee, her hands shook so badly that some of it sloshed onto the saucer. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'll get you a clean cup." "It's fine," Ethan said gently. "Really? Are you okay?" The kindness in his voice was her undoing. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away quickly, pressing her hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. She made it 3 steps toward the kitchen before her knees buckled, and she caught herself against the counter, the coffee pot slipping from her fingers and shattering on the tile floor. The crash brought Pete, the night manager, out from the back. "Jesus, Rachel, that's the second pot this week." "I'm sorry," Rachel choked out, dropping to her knees to gather the pieces. "I'm so sorry, I'll pay for it. I'll forget the damn pot." Pete's voice softened as he crouched beside her. "What's going on? You've been off all night." Rachel couldn't answer. She couldn't tell him that she'd been living in her car for 3 weeks, that she'd been using the diner's bathroom to wash up before shifts, storing her uniform in her locker, parking behind the grocery store to sleep, that her ex-husband's lawyer had somehow found out everything and was using it to take Sophie away. "I need to go," she said, standing abruptly. "I need to leave. I'm sorry, Pete. I know we're short-staffed, but I have to—" "Take the rest of the night," Pete said. "Go. Handle whatever you need to handle." Rachel pulled off her apron with shaking hands, grabbed her phone from the counter, and ran for the door. The rain hit her like a wall, immediately soaking through her thin uniform, but she didn't care. She stumbled to her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a passenger door that didn't open anymore, and collapsed into the driver's seat. The legal papers were on the passenger seat where she'd left them. She picked them up with numb fingers and read them again, even though she'd already memorized every word. Emergency custody hearing. 12 p.m., November 16th. Petitioner alleges unsafe living conditions, financial instability, and failure to provide adequate housing for the minor child. Respondent must appear with documentation proving stable residence and household income sufficient to meet the child's basic needs. There was more, but Rachel couldn't see it through her tears. Marcus had done this. Her ex-husband had hired some investigator to follow her, to document her working double shifts, sleeping in her car, eating ramen noodles for dinner. He'd taken pictures of her washing her face in gas station bathrooms. He'd recorded her struggling, and now he was going to use it to take Sophie. The worst part was that Marcus didn't even want Sophie. He'd never wanted her. When Rachel had gotten pregnant 7 years ago, he'd suggested an abortion. When she'd refused, he'd made it clear that fatherhood was an inconvenience he was tolerating, not embracing. He'd spent Sophie's entire childhood working 80-hour weeks at his law firm, building the career and reputation that had eventually led him to leave Rachel for his colleague. But Marcus Hoffman didn't tolerate failure, and he certainly didn't tolerate the narrative of being a deadbeat dad. When Rachel had filed for divorce and asked for primary custody, he'd fought it, not because he wanted to raise Sophie, but because losing custody made him look bad. The judge had seen through him and given Rachel primary custody, with Marcus getting every other weekend. For 2 years that arrangement had worked. Marcus had his perfect life with his perfect new wife and their perfect house in the suburbs, and Rachel had Sophie. She'd been managing. Barely, but managing. Then 6 months ago, Rachel had lost her job as a legal secretary when the firm she worked for downsized. She'd burned through her savings in 3 months. She'd lost her apartment in month 4. By month 5, she'd moved into her car and started working at the diner because it was the only place that would hire her without checking references or running a background check on her employment gap. She'd been planning to tell the court. She'd been saving every penny for a deposit on a new apartment. She'd been 1 week away from having enough. But Marcus had found out first. Rachel pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and screamed. It was a raw animal sound of pure despair, the kind of sound that came from knowing you'd fought as hard as you could and still lost everything that mattered. She screamed until her throat was raw, until there was nothing left inside her but emptiness. Then her phone rang. Rachel looked at the screen through blurry eyes. Unknown number, probably another bill collector. She let it ring. It rang again immediately. On the third call, she answered. What? Miss Moore? This is David Chen from Legal Aid. I received your application for emergency representation this afternoon. Rachel sat up straight. She'd filled out the application 3 weeks ago, before she'd even received the custody papers. She'd been told it would take months to get a response. I've reviewed your case, the lawyer continued, and I want to be straight with you. This is going to be very difficult. Your ex-husband has resources, and the evidence he's presenting. I know what the evidence shows, Rachel said. I'm homeless. I'm broke. I'm a terrible mother who can't even keep a roof over her daughter's head. That's not what I was going to say. Chen's voice was firm. What I was going to say is that the evidence shows systemic failure, not personal failure. You lost your job due to corporate downsizing. You've been working full-time while homeless. You've kept your daughter in a stable school, maintained her doctor's appointments, never missed a parent-teacher conference. The problem isn't that you're a bad mother. The problem is that you're a good mother with no support system fighting against a man with unlimited resources. Rachel closed her eyes. Can you help me? There was a long pause. I can appear with you tomorrow. I can argue that temporary housing instability shouldn't override years of primary caregiving. But Miss Moore, I need to be honest with you. Unless you can show up tomorrow with proof of stable housing and a household income above the poverty line, I don't think we're going to win. I have 12 hours, Rachel whispered. I know. I'm sorry. If you can find any family member, any friend who would be willing to let you and Sophie stay with them temporarily, bring documentation, a lease, a letter, anything that shows stability. I don't have anyone. Rachel's voice was hollow. My parents are dead. I don't have siblings. Marcus made sure I lost touch with all my friends during the marriage. There's no one. Another pause. When Chen spoke again, his voice was gentle. Then I'll see you in court tomorrow, and we'll do the best we can with what we have. Sometimes judges surprise us. He hung up. Rachel sat in her car, listening to the rain hammer on the roof, and tried to figure out how to explain to her 6-year-old daughter that Mommy had failed her, that the judge was going to make Sophie go live with Daddy and his new wife in their big house with the pool and the playroom, and Mommy wouldn't be able to tuck her in at night anymore. She was still sitting there 20 minutes later when someone knocked on her window. Rachel jumped, her heart slamming against her ribs. She looked up to see the man from booth 7 standing in the rain, holding an umbrella. His daughter was with him, clutching his hand and looking worried. Rachel rolled down the window an inch. I'm fine, thank you. No, you're not, the man said. Not unkindly, just stating a fact. I'm Ethan. This is Lucy. We were about to leave, but Lucy wanted to make sure you were okay. The little girl nodded solemnly. You looked sad. Daddy says when people are sad, we should check on them. Despite everything, Rachel felt a ghost of a smile cross her face. That's very sweet, honey. I'm okay. Just having a hard night. I heard your phone call, Ethan said. The one inside the diner. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to hear. Rachel's stomach dropped. Oh, you've got a custody hearing tomorrow. 12 hours to prove you have a stable home. Yes. Rachel didn't know what else to say. The humiliation was crushing. Ethan shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Lucy tugged on his sleeve and whispered something Rachel couldn't hear. He nodded at his daughter, then looked back at Rachel. This is going to sound crazy, he said, but I think I can help you. Rachel laughed bitterly. Unless you've got a spare apartment and a 6-figure job you're willing to lend me for a day, I don't think anyone can help me. I have a house, Ethan said. 3 bedrooms. It's paid off. And I have a decent income. I own a construction company. Small, but stable. Rachel stared at him. I don't understand. Daddy wants to help you keep your little girl, Lucy said. He told me we could share our house. Lucy, let me explain, Ethan said gently. He turned back to Rachel. Look, I know this sounds insane. We don't know each other, but I'm a single parent too. My wife died 3 years ago. I know what it's like to be terrified of losing your kid, a feeling like the system is designed to take them away from people who don't fit the perfect mold. I still don't understand what you're offering, Rachel said slowly. Ethan took a deep breath. I'm offering you my house, my address, documentation that you and your daughter live with me in a stable 2-parent household. The words hung in the air between them. Rachel's mind went blank. Then it started racing. Then it went blank again. You want me to lie to the court, she finally said. I want you to keep your daughter, Ethan corrected. Everything I'm offering you is real. The house is real. The income is real. The only thing that's not real is the timeline. We just met instead of living together for months. But if you need proof of stability, I can give you that. Why? Rachel's voice cracked. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I could be a terrible person. I could be dangerous. Are you? No, but then I'm offering. Ethan's jaw was set. My daughter asked me on the way out if we could help you. She said you reminded her of how I looked after her mom died. Like you were trying so hard to be strong, but everything was falling apart inside. Lucy's 6. She shouldn't be able to recognize that kind of pain, but she can because she watched me go through it. Rachel looked at the little girl, who was watching her with large, serious eyes. I told Lucy I'd think about it, Ethan continued. Then I got to my truck and realized I was about to drive away from someone who needed help because it was complicated and messy and not my problem. And I thought about the people who did that to me when Sarah died. The family members who said they'd help but disappeared. The friends who stopped calling because grief made them uncomfortable. I swore I'd never be that person. This is different, Rachel whispered. This is asking you to lie for a stranger. I'm not asking you for anything, Ethan said. I'm offering. You can say no. You can walk away. But if you say yes, I will show up to that courthouse tomorrow with every piece of documentation you need to prove that you and your daughter have a stable home. I'll bring utility bills, mortgage papers, pay stubs, whatever the judge wants to see. I'll sit in that courtroom and I'll tell them that you're part of my household. They'll ask questions, Rachel said. Her heart was pounding. They'll want to know how we met, how long we've been together. Then we'll figure out our story tonight. We've got 12 hours. People have built less on more. Rachel's hands were shaking again. This was insane. This was illegal. This was fraud. This was the only chance she had to keep Sophie. Why? She asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you risk this for us? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 2 years ago, my brother tried to take Lucy from me. He said a construction worker couldn't raise a little girl alone, said she needed a mother figure, a stable 2-parent home. He had a wife, a bigger house, more money. The only thing I had was 3 years of showing up every single day for my daughter. of learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, of joining a daddy-daughter book club at the library so she wouldn't feel different, of being there. He paused, his hand tightening on Lucy's shoulder. The judge saw that. She saw past the money and the perfect setup, and she recognized what actually mattered. But it could have gone the other way, so easily. And if it had, if I'd lost Lucy because I didn't have a wife, or a big enough house, or the right kind of life on paper, I don't know what I would have done. Rachel was crying now, tears streaming down her face. So yes, Ethan said, I will lie to a judge to keep your daughter with you, because I believe that you're the parent she needs. I believe that love and presence matter more than money, and I believe that sometimes the system needs a little help seeing what's true. Lucy pulled away from her father and walked closer to Rachel's window. Can we help you? Please? Rachel looked at this child, this stranger's child, and saw her own daughter's face, saw Sophie's smile, her laugh, her habit of singing made-up songs while she drew pictures, saw every bedtime story, every scraped knee she'd kissed better, every nightmare she'd chased away, saw everything she was about to lose. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Yes, please help me. Ethan nodded once, decisively. Get out of the car. You're coming home with us tonight. We have a lot to figure out before morning. Okay. Ethan's house was exactly what Rachel had expected, and nothing like it at the same time. It was a small ranch-style home in a modest neighborhood with a neat lawn and a porch light that created a warm yellow pool of welcome in the darkness. The kind of house Rachel had dreamed of having when she was pregnant with Sophie, before she'd learned that dreams cost more than she could afford. Inside, it was clean but lived in. Toys in a basket by the couch, drawings on the refrigerator, a stack of library books on the coffee table. The kind of home that was actually used, not staged. Lucy, why don't you show Rachel where the guest room is, Ethan said, setting his keys in a bowl by the door. I'll make coffee. We're going to be up for a while. Lucy took Rachel's hand with the unself-conscious trust of a child who'd been taught the world was safe. This way? The guest room is next to my room. We can be neighbors. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a double bed covered in a blue quilt and a dresser that looked like it had been refinished by hand. There was a photograph on the nightstand, a beautiful woman with dark hair and Lucy's same smile, holding a newborn baby. That's Mommy and me, Lucy said, following Rachel's gaze. She died when I was 3. I don't remember her very much, but Daddy tells me stories. She was very beautiful, Rachel said softly. You look like her. Daddy says I have her smile and his stubbornness. Lucy grinned. He says that's a dangerous combination. Despite everything, Rachel laughed. It felt strange, like she'd forgotten how. They returned to the kitchen to find Ethan setting out mugs and a notepad. He gestured for Rachel to sit. Okay, he said, clicking a pen. We need a believable story. The court is going to ask how we know each other, how long you've been living here, what our relationship is. We need answers that are consistent and detailed enough to hold up under questioning. Rachel wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, grateful for its warmth. How do we do this? We start with the truth and build around it, Ethan said. The best lies are mostly true. So, you work at the Silver Creek Diner. How long? 3 weeks. Where before that? I was unemployed for about 3 months. Before that, I was a legal secretary at Morrison & Associates for 5 years. Ethan nodded, writing. Okay, so here's our story. You and I met 4 months ago at the diner. I'm a regular. I stop in for breakfast on Saturday mornings with Lucy. We started talking. You mentioned you were going through a divorce and looking for work. I mentioned I sometimes need administrative help with my construction business, invoices, scheduling, that kind of thing. We exchanged numbers. He looked up at her. True so far? Except for the timeline, yes. I do know how to do all of that. Good. So we started working together. You'd come to my office, which is the converted garage out back, a few times a week to help with paperwork. Lucy was often here because I work from home when I'm not on job sites. You and she hit it off. Lucy nodded enthusiastically. I can say you helped me with my homework. I'm really good at making friends. Meanwhile, Ethan continued, you mentioned you were having trouble finding an affordable apartment. Your ex-husband was being difficult about support payments. You were stressed. About 2 months ago, I offered you the guest room temporarily while you got back on your feet. You and Sophie moved in. Sophie started at Silver Creek Elementary. That's where Lucy goes, so it's actually the school she'd be zoned for from this address. Rachel's head was spinning. That's actually believable. It's believable because it's exactly what I would do, Ethan said. I have this room. I'd rather see it used by someone who needs it than sit empty. And I really do need help with my business paperwork. I'm terrible at admin work. So if anyone asks, you're not just living here, you're working for me too. That covers the income stability question. What about our relationship? Rachel asked quietly. Are we supposed to be together? Ethan paused. I think we keep it ambiguous. We're housemates, co-parents who are helping each other. Maybe there's potential for more, maybe not. If the court assumes we're together, we don't correct them. But we don't lie about being married or engaged. Why not? Rachel asked. Wouldn't that be more convincing? Maybe. But it's also easier to disprove. Your ex-husband's lawyer will be looking for holes in our story. If we claim to be married and there's no marriage license, we're done. If we're just two single parents sharing a house and raising our kids together, that's unusual but not illegal. He was right. Rachel could see the logic even through her exhaustion. Okay, she said. What else do I need to know? They spent the next 3 hours building their story. Ethan quizzed her on details about the house, where the fuses were, what kind of coffee he bought, how he took his eggs. They went through Lucy's schedule, her teacher's name, her favorite subjects. They talked about Ethan's business, his clients, his work history. By 3 a.m, Rachel could describe the layout of the house with her eyes closed. She knew that Ethan woke up at 5:30 every morning, that he made Lucy pancakes shaped like animals on Sundays, that his favorite color was green and he couldn't stand the smell of cilantro. She knew that Lucy was reading above grade level, that she took gymnastics on Tuesdays, that her best friend was named Emma. She knew 1,000 small details that made the lie feel real. One more thing, Ethan said as the sky outside began to lighten. Your ex-husband's lawyer is going to try to rattle you. He's going to suggest things, imply things, try to make you defensive. Don't take the bait. Keep your answers short and factual. Don't explain more than you're asked. And if you don't know an answer, it's okay to say, I don't recall, or I'd have to check my records. You sound like you've been through this before, Rachel said. I have. When my brother tried to take Lucy. I learned a lot about how these hearings work. He met her eyes. We're going to get through this, Rachel. You're going to walk out of that courthouse with your daughter. Rachel wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly her chest ached. Why are you doing this? She asked one more time. Really? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because I remember what it felt like to be so scared of losing my daughter that I couldn't breathe. Because I remember lying awake at night imagining her calling someone else daddy. Because I know that the system doesn't care about bedtime stories or inside jokes or who shows up to every single school play. The system cares about checklists and boxes and proof that you fit the right category. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dawn. And because Lucy asked me to help you, my daughter, who lost her mother and knows what it feels like to have your world fall apart, asked me to make sure another little girl didn't lose her mom. How could I say no to that? Rachel stood too. She walked over to Ethan and put her hand on his arm. Thank you, she whispered. I don't have any way to repay you for this, but thank you. You don't need to repay me, Ethan said. Just be the mother your daughter needs. That's enough. At 7 o'clock, Ethan drove Rachel to pick up Sophie from Marcus's house. They'd agreed that Rachel would explain the situation to Sophie simply. Mommy has a new friend who's letting us stay at his house for a while. Sophie, blessedly, was 6 and adaptable and more excited about having a new friend than worried about the logistics. By 9 o'clock, both girls were eating breakfast at Ethan's kitchen table, already chattering like they'd known each other for years. By 10 o'clock, Rachel was dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, her hair pulled back, her hands steady. At 11:30, they pulled up to the courthouse. Marcus was waiting on the steps with his lawyer, James Porter, a man Rachel recognized from the firm where she used to work. Porter had a reputation for being ruthless and expensive. He smiled when he saw Rachel, the kind of smile that said he'd already won. Then he saw Ethan. Then he saw the way Ethan's hand rested protectively on Rachel's lower back as they walked up the steps. Then he saw the envelope of documents Ethan was carrying. Porter's smile faltered. "Marcus?" Rachel said coolly. "James?" "Rachel." Marcus looked her up and down, then glanced at Ethan with poorly concealed disdain. "I see you've found yourself a new friend." "This is Ethan Brooks," Rachel said. "I've been staying at his house for the past 2 months." She handed Porter the envelope. "Documentation of residence as requested, utility bills, mortgage papers, proof of income, and a letter from Sophie's school confirming her enrollment and my active involvement in her education." Porter opened the envelope, his expression carefully neutral as he scanned the contents. "I see," he said. "And Mr. Brooks is a friend," Ethan said firmly. "Who has a stable home and a stable income and is happy to provide Rachel and Sophie with both while Rachel gets back on her feet." "How convenient," Marcus said. His voice dripped with sarcasm. "How long have you known my ex-wife, Mr. Brooks?" 4 months, Ethan said without hesitation. "We met at the diner where she works. I hired her to help with administrative work for my construction business." "A construction worker." Marcus's lip curled. "How quaint." "A business owner," Ethan corrected, his voice hardening. "Who employs 15 people and has contracts with 3 major developers in this county. Would you like to see my tax returns?" Before Marcus could respond, the courthouse doors opened and a bailiff called them inside. The hearing room was smaller than Rachel had expected. Just a desk for the judge, a table for each party, and a few chairs for witnesses. David Chen, her legal aid attorney, was already there. He stood when Rachel entered, his expression carefully optimistic. "Ms. Moore, Mr. Brooks, glad you could make it." They took their seats. Across the aisle, Marcus and Porter whispered to each other, Porter's expression growing darker as he continued to review the documentation. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is an emergency custody hearing in the matter of Hoffman versus Moore," she said. "Mr. Porter, you filed the motion. Please present your case." Porter stood. "Your Honor, my client is seeking emergency custody of his daughter, Sophie Hoffman Moore, based on documented evidence that the child's mother is currently homeless and financially unstable, creating an unsafe environment for a 6-year-old child." He laid out the evidence methodically. Photos of Rachel sleeping in her car, bank statements showing an account balance of $37, employment records showing gaps and inconsistency. Rachel felt each piece of evidence like a physical blow. It was all true, all of it. "Your Honor," Porter continued, "while we sympathize with Miss Moore's financial difficulties, the welfare of the child must be paramount. Sophie deserves a stable home with adequate resources. My client and his wife can provide that. Ms. Moore, despite her best intentions, cannot." He sat down, looking satisfied. The judge turned to David Chen. "Mr. Chen?" Chen stood, and Rachel held her breath. "Your Honor, the evidence Mr. Porter presented is outdated. Miss Moore's circumstances have changed significantly in the past 2 months. She is no longer homeless. She is currently residing at 2847 Maple Street with Mr. Ethan Brooks, a homeowner with a stable income. She is gainfully employed both at the Silver Creek Diner and as an administrative assistant for Mr. Brooks's construction company. Her daughter is enrolled in an excellent school and thriving." He handed the judge the envelope of documents. "Furthermore," Chen continued, "Ms. Moore's temporary housing instability was the direct result of corporate downsizing and a difficult divorce, not neglect or poor decision-making. She has maintained consistent involvement in her daughter's education and healthcare throughout this period. She has never missed a parenting time exchange. She has never put her daughter at risk." The judge reviewed the documents in silence. The room was so quiet Rachel could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Porter, I'd like to hear from your client. Mr. Hoffman, when was the last time you attended a parent-teacher conference for Sophie?" Marcus looked startled. I would have to check my calendar, Your Honor. A rough estimate would be fine. Perhaps 6 months ago? And when was the last time Sophie stayed overnight at your home? 2 weekends ago, as per the custody arrangement." "I see. And during that weekend, what activities did you and Sophie do together? Marcus hesitated. My wife took her to the park. I had some work to catch up on. I see. The judge made a note. Ms. Moore, same questions. When was the last time you attended a parent-teacher conference? Last Thursday, Your Honor, Rachel said. Mrs. Patterson is Sophie's teacher. We discussed Sophie's progress in reading. She's moved up to the advanced group, and her struggles with math. I've been working with her on multiplication tables every night. And what is Sophie's current favorite activity? Rachel smiled despite herself. Drawing. Specifically drawing elaborate fantasy worlds with fairy kingdoms and dragon caves. She wants to be an illustrator when she grows up. This week she's been working on a comic book about a princess who saves herself. The judge's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Brooks, you're present here as Ms. Moore's landlord and employer? Ethan stood. Yes, Your Honor, and as her friend. Tell me about Sophie, since she's been living in your home. Sophie is bright, creative, and kind, Ethan said without hesitation. She and my daughter Lucy have become close friends. They do homework together, play together. Sophie helps Lucy with art projects, and Lucy helps Sophie with math. Every night at dinner, we go around the table and share our high point and low point of the day. Sophie always has something to share. She's a happy kid who knows she's loved. The judge leaned forward. You have a daughter as well? Yes, Your Honor, Lucy. She's 6, same age as Sophie. My wife passed away 3 years ago. I've been raising Lucy on my own since then. And how do you feel about having 2 children in your home? Honestly? Ethan met the judge's eyes. It's been good for Lucy. She lost her mother. Having another little girl around, seeing Rachel mother Sophie, it's helped her heal. And Sophie's been good for our family too. She's teaching Lucy to be more creative, more confident. Having them both in the house has made it feel like a home again instead of just a place where Lucy and I live. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Marcus. Mr. Hoffman, why are you seeking custody now? Your daughter has been in her mother's primary care for 2 years. Why this sudden concern? Because my ex-wife is homeless, Marcus said. She's living with some man she barely knows. I have documentation here showing they've known each other for 4 months and have a professional relationship as well as a personal one, the judge interrupted. That's not barely knows. She was sleeping in her car. Marcus's composure was cracking. She lost her job. She can't support herself, let alone our daughter. She lost her job due to circumstances beyond her control and has secured new employment. She has secured stable housing. What specifically concerns you about her current ability to parent? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Porter desperately. Porter stood. Your Honor, with all due respect, we question the legitimacy of this sudden stability. Ms. Moore was homeless 3 weeks ago. Now she claims to have a home, multiple sources of income, and a supportive co-parenting arrangement. The timing is suspicious. Are you suggesting Ms. Moore is lying? The judge asked, her voice sharp. I'm suggesting that this arrangement may have been hastily constructed for the purpose of this hearing, rather than being a genuine long-term living situation. The judge looked at Ethan. Mr. Brooks, is this a temporary arrangement designed to help Miss Moore win this custody case? Rachel's heart stopped. This was it. The moment where everything fell apart. Ethan stood again. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. Your Honor, I offered Rachel and Sophie a place to stay because they needed one and I had room. I offered Rachel work because I needed help and she was qualified. Whether she wins or loses this case doesn't change the fact that she and Sophie are welcome in my home for as long as they need to be there. He paused, then continued. I'm a single father. I know how hard it is to do this alone. I know what it's like to be judged for not fitting the traditional mold of what a family should look like. When I met Rachel, I saw someone who was fighting to give her daughter the best life she could with the resources she had. That's what I've been doing for Lucy for 3 years. How could I not help? The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at her notes, then at Marcus, then at Rachel. Here is what I see, she said. I see a father who has the resources to provide for his daughter, but lacks the involvement. I see a mother who lacks resources, but has consistent, dedicated involvement in every aspect of her daughter's life. I see a mother who, when faced with homelessness, did not give up or ask her ex-husband for help. She found a job. She found housing. She continued showing up for her daughter. She closed the file. The emergency custody motion is denied. Sophie will remain in her mother's primary custody. Mr. Hoffman, your visitation schedule will continue as previously established. Mrs. Moore, I strongly encourage you to continue building financial stability, but I see no evidence that your temporary housing difficulties have negatively impacted your daughter. Rachel couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She'd won. The judge stood. This hearing is adjourned. As soon as the judge left the room, Rachel's legs gave out. Ethan caught her, holding her steady as she sobbed into his shoulder. You did it, he murmured. You kept her. Across the room, Marcus was arguing with Porter in a harsh whisper. They left without looking at Rachel. David Chen came over, smiling. Congratulations, Ms. Moore, that was a good outcome. Thank you, Rachel managed. Thank you for believing me. I believed in what I saw in the documents, Chen said, but Mr. Brooks made the difference. That testimony about Sophie and Lucy, that's what convinced the judge this was real. After Chen left, Rachel pulled back from Ethan and looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. We lied to a judge, she whispered. We committed fraud. We told the truth about what matters, Ethan said firmly. Everything I said in there was true. You and Sophie are welcome in my home. You do work for me. Sophie is good for Lucy. The only thing I didn't mention was that we met 3 days ago instead of 4 months ago. That's a lie about timing, not about truth. Rachel knew he was right. She also knew they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home, Ethan said. We pick up the girls from my neighbor's house. We have dinner. We let Sophie tell us about her day. And tomorrow, we figure out the next step. Rachel nodded numbly. They walked out of the courthouse into bright November sunshine. As they reached Ethan's truck, Rachel stopped. Rachel, I need you to know something, she said. I don't know how I'm ever going to repay you for this. For lying for me. For risking everything for a stranger. I don't know how... Rachel. Ethan turned to face her. I didn't do this expecting repayment. I did it because it was right. Because you deserve to be your daughter's mother. Because the system doesn't always see what's true. And sometimes people need to help it along. He unlocked the truck. Besides, he added with a small smile, you're not a stranger anymore. You're my administrative assistant and my housemate. That makes you family. Rachel got into the truck, those words echoing in her mind. Family. She'd been alone for so long she'd forgotten what that word felt like. As Ethan drove through the streets of Silver Creek back toward the house that was now, somehow, her home, Rachel looked out the window and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, she'd been homeless, hopeless, preparing to lose her daughter. Today, she had a home. She had a job. She had a strange, fragile alliance with a man who'd risked everything for someone he didn't know. She had Sophie, and she had no idea what happened next. But for the first time in months, she had hope. And right now, that was enough. The neighbor's house was only 3 blocks away, but the drive felt like crossing into another world. Rachel stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of Silver Creek pass by. Streets she'd driven down 100 times while living in her car, never imagining she'd be returning to an actual home. Ethan pulled into the driveway of a cheerful yellow house with a wraparound porch. Before he'd even turned off the engine, the front door burst open and 2 small figures came running out. Daddy! Lucy flew down the porch steps and launched herself at Ethan as he got out of the truck. Did it work? Is Sophie's mommy okay? Sophie was right behind her, but she ran to Rachel, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist with a fierceness that made Rachel's breath catch. Mommy, I was so scared, Sophie whispered into Rachel's stomach. Mrs. Chen said you had to go talk to a judge about me. Rachel knelt down and pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. I know, baby, but everything's okay now. Everything's going to be okay. So we get to stay with Lucy and Mr. Ethan? Yes, we get to stay. Sophie pulled back, her face breaking into a smile that nearly destroyed Rachel. Good, because Lucy and me made a fort in her room and we need more time to finish it. It's going to have a moat made out of pillows. Despite everything, Rachel laughed. A moat made of pillows sounds very important. It is, Lucy said seriously, coming over to join them. We're protecting the castle from the dragon army. Sophie's really good at drawing dragons. She's going to make us flags. Ethan exchanged a look with his neighbor, Margaret Chen, an elderly Korean woman who was watching the scene from her porch with a knowing smile. She was David Chen's mother, Rachel realized. That's why the lawyer had been able to respond so quickly to her application. Thank you for watching them, Margaret, Ethan called. Any time, Margaret said. They've been perfect angels. Well, perfectly angelic conspirators building elaborate fortifications anyway. She came down the steps, moving slowly but steadily. I take it the hearing went well? It did, Rachel said, standing. Thanks to your son and to Ethan. Margaret studied Rachel with sharp, assessing eyes. Then she smiled. Good. David told me about your situation. I'm glad the judge saw sense. She turned to Ethan. You're a good man, Ethan Brooks. Sarah would be proud of what you did today. Something flickered across Ethan's face. Grief, gratitude, something Rachel couldn't quite name. I hope so. I know so. Margaret patted his arm, then looked at the girls. Now get these children home and feed them. They've been planning their architectural masterpiece for hours and need fuel for construction. The drive back to Ethan's house, Rachel had to remind herself it was her house too now, at least temporarily, was filled with the girls' chatter about their fort plans. Rachel listened, letting their voices wash over her, grounding her in the reality that she'd actually won. Sophie was hers, still hers. When they pulled into the driveway, Rachel saw the house differently than she had in the dark early morning hours. In daylight, it looked solid and safe, with flower beds that someone clearly tended and a tire swing hanging from the oak tree in the front yard. It looked like the kind of place where children grew up happy. Inside, Ethan headed straight for the kitchen. Who's hungry? Me, both girls chorused. How do grilled cheese and tomato soup sound? Can we have the fancy grilled cheese? Lucy asked. With 3 different kinds of cheese? I suppose this is a celebration worthy of fancy grilled cheese, Ethan agreed. He glanced at Rachel. You okay with that? It took Rachel a moment to realize he was asking her opinion on lunch in her own home. In their home. Whatever this was. Sounds perfect, she said. While Ethan cooked, the girls dragged Rachel upstairs to see the fort in progress. Lucy's room was painted lavender with white trim, filled with books and art supplies, and a collection of stuffed animals that seemed to have their own elaborate social hierarchy. The fort itself was an impressive structure made from bed sheets, chairs, and what looked like every pillow in the house. The girls had fashioned a drawbridge from a wooden plank and filled the interior with flashlights, books, and Sophie's already growing collection of dragon drawings. This is amazing, Rachel said, genuinely impressed. We worked really hard, Sophie said proudly. Lucy had the idea for the drawbridge. I wanted a regular door, but she said drawbridges are more authentic. Authentic is important, Rachel agreed, fighting back another wave of tears. This morning she'd been preparing to tell Sophie they were going to be separated. Now her daughter was debating the architectural merits of drawbridges with her new best friend. Girls, lunch! Ethan called from downstairs. They ate at the kitchen table, the same table where Rachel and Ethan had built their lie just hours earlier. But now it felt different. Sophie was chattering about school, telling Lucy about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, and her best friend, Emma. Lucy was describing the chapter book they were reading in class. Ethan was asking follow-up questions, genuinely interested in the minutiae of 6-year-old social dynamics. It felt normal. It felt like family. It felt like a lie that was becoming true. After lunch, Ethan suggested the girls go work on their fort while he and Rachel talked. Once they'd thundered back upstairs, he poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from her. So, he said, we need to talk about what happens next. Rachel wrapped her hands around her mug. I know. I've been thinking about it. The judge bought our story, but your ex-husband didn't. He's going to be watching, looking for proof that this is fake. We need to be careful. How careful? Careful enough that if he drives by, he sees your car here. Careful enough that if he asks Sophie questions, her answers line up with what we said in court. Careful enough that we actually live the life we claim to be living. Rachel nodded slowly. So I really do need to live here, not just pretend. For a while, yes. At least until things settle down and he stops looking for ammunition. Ethan paused. I know this isn't what you signed up for. If you want to find another solution— No, Rachel said quickly. No, This is more than I could have hoped for. I just want to make sure I'm not imposing, that I'm actually contributing something. You can start by actually helping with my business paperwork, Ethan said with a slight smile. That part wasn't entirely a lie. I really am terrible at invoicing and scheduling. I can do that. I'm good at that kind of work. Good, because I have approximately 6 months of backlogged receipts that need to be organized. He stood and grabbed a large cardboard box from the counter, setting it in front of Rachel with a sheepish expression. I wasn't exaggerating about being bad at admin. Rachel looked into the box and saw a chaotic jumble of receipts, invoices, handwritten notes, and what appeared to be a few napkins with phone numbers scrawled on them. Oh my God, she said, how do you even file taxes? With great difficulty and a very patient accountant who charges me extra for the mess. Despite everything, Rachel found herself laughing. Okay, this is going to take some serious organizing. That's why I need you, Ethan said, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, that's why the job is real. You're actually solving a real problem. I'll start tomorrow, Rachel promised. Today, I just need to process everything. Understandable. Ethan picked up his coffee mug. I'm going to go check on the girls, make sure they haven't built a fort so elaborate we can't get them out for dinner. After he left, Rachel sat alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at the box of receipts and trying to understand how her life had changed so completely in 24 hours. Yesterday at this time, she'd been serving coffee at the diner, convinced she was about to lose Sophie. Now she was sitting in a stranger's kitchen, planning to organize his business files, living in his house, raising their daughters together like they were actually a family. The weight of what they'd done, what they were continuing to do, settled over her like a heavy blanket. They'd lied to a judge. They'd falsified documents, or at least misrepresented the timeline. If Marcus found out, if anyone found out, they could both face serious consequences. But Sophie was upstairs building a pillow fort, happy and safe and still her daughter. Rachel decided that was worth the risk. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine that felt surreal in its normalcy. Rachel woke early and made breakfast while Ethan got the girls ready for school. They drove both girls to Silver Creek Elementary together, and Rachel marveled at how easily Sophie and Lucy had bonded. They walked into school hand in hand, already finishing each other's sentences. After drop-off, Ethan would head to whatever construction site he was managing that day, and Rachel would spend the morning tackling his catastrophic filing system. She'd set up a workspace in the converted garage that served as his office, a surprisingly well-equipped space with a large desk, filing cabinets, and blueprints tacked to every wall. The work was tedious but satisfying. She created systems for invoicing, organized receipts by category and date, set up a digital filing system to replace his chaotic paper method. By the end of the first week, she'd already saved him several $100s in duplicate orders he'd made because he couldn't find his original receipts. You're a miracle worker, Ethan said, looking at the organized files with something like awe. My accountant is going to cry tears of joy. This is basic organization, Rachel said, though she felt pleased. You just needed someone who actually likes making spreadsheets. I didn't know such people existed. In the afternoons, Rachel would head to the diner for her shift, working from 3 to 11. Pete had been understanding about her needing to adjust her schedule, especially after she'd explained, with some creative truth-bending, that she'd found more stable housing and was picking up additional work. The hardest part was maintaining the lie with Sophie. Her daughter, blessedly 6 and trusting, had accepted the story that Mr. Ethan was Mommy's friend who was helping them out. But Rachel knew that as Sophie got older, she'd ask harder questions. Mommy, is Mr. Ethan your boyfriend? Sophie asked one night as Rachel was tucking her in. Rachel's heart jumped. Why do you ask? Emma at school said if a boy and a girl live together, they have to be boyfriend and girlfriend. Or married. And you and Mr. Ethan live together. Rachel chose her words carefully. Mr. Ethan and I are friends who are helping each other. Sometimes grown-ups who are friends live together because it makes life easier, like having roommates. Oh, Sophie seemed to accept this. Lucy said her daddy isn't looking for a new mommy because her first mommy was the best and no one could replace her. Rachel felt her throat tighten. That's true. Lucy's mommy was very special. Do you think you'll get a new daddy? Sophie asked. Since my first daddy doesn't really want to be my daddy anymore, the question hit Rachel like a physical blow. Sweetheart, your daddy loves you. He shows it differently than I do. He doesn't know my teacher's name, Sophie said matter-of-factly, or that I like drawing dragons, or that I'm scared of the dark. Mr. Ethan knows all those things, and he's only known me for a week. Rachel didn't know what to say to that, because Sophie was right. Ethan, in 1 week, had learned more about her daughter than Marcus had bothered to learn in 6 years. Sometimes people show love in different ways, Rachel finally said, though the words felt hollow even to her. I like how Mr. Ethan shows it, Sophie said. He makes animal pancakes and he doesn't get mad when I spill things, and he fixed the wheel on my drawing board without me even asking. That's what love looks like, right? Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. After Sophie fell asleep, Rachel found Ethan in the living room, looking through blueprints for an upcoming project. He looked up when she entered. Everything okay? Rachel sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Sophie asked if you were my boyfriend, then she told me you're a better father than Marcus. Ethan set down his blueprints. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You didn't do anything wrong, Rachel interrupted. You're just being yourself, being kind, paying attention. It's not your fault that Marcus never learned how to do those things. What did you tell her about us? That we're friends helping each other, that sometimes adults live together as roommates. Rachel rubbed her eyes. I don't know how long that explanation is going to hold up. We'll handle it when we need to, Ethan said. For now, she's happy and safe. That's what matters. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Can I ask you something? Rachel said. About your wife. Ethan stiffened slightly but nodded. Lucy said you're not looking for someone to replace her mother. Is that true? Yes. Ethan's voice was quiet. She was everything. My best friend, my partner, the love of my life. When she died, a part of me died with her. I'm not interested in finding a replacement because there isn't one. What we had was singular. I'm sorry, Rachel said. I shouldn't have asked. It's okay. It's a reasonable question given that we're living together and raising kids together. He managed a small smile. People are going to assume things about us. Hell, the judge probably assumed we were together even though we never said we were. Does that bother you? Should it bother you? Ethan countered. You're the one who just got out of a marriage with someone who made you feel worthless. The last thing you probably want is people thinking you jumped right into something new. Rachel considered this. Marcus didn't make me feel worthless. He made me feel invisible, like I was a supporting character in his life story, not the protagonist of my own. It's different. Is it better or worse? I don't know. Both, maybe. Rachel pulled her knees up to her chest. I spent 7 years trying to be whatever he needed me to be, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect accessory for his perfect life. And it was never enough because he didn't actually see me. He saw the idea of what a wife should be. I see you, Ethan said quietly. For what it's worth. I see someone who fought like hell to keep her daughter, someone who's brilliant at organizing chaos, someone who makes Sophie light up every time she talks about you. That's not invisible. Rachel felt tears prickling at her eyes again. She seemed to cry more in this house than she had in years. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for all of this. We're helping each other, Ethan said, echoing the words he'd told the judge. That's what people should do. The second week brought new challenges. Marcus started calling more frequently, asking to speak to Sophie at odd hours. Rachel suspected he was trying to catch them off guard, hoping Sophie would say something that contradicted their story. But Sophie, blessedly, was consistent. Yes, she lived with Mommy and Mr. Ethan and Lucy. Yes, she had her own bed in the guest room. Yes, Mommy worked at the diner and helped Mr. Ethan with his business. No, she never had to sleep in the car anymore. Each conversation left Rachel drained with anxiety, waiting for the question that would unravel everything. It came on a Tuesday evening. Rachel was at the diner when her phone rang with Marcus's number. She stepped outside to take the call. We need to talk, Marcus said without preamble. About this living arrangement of yours. Rachel's heart started pounding. What about it? I find it very convenient that you suddenly have this perfect setup right before our court date. New job, new house, new boyfriend. Ethan isn't my boyfriend. Roommate, then. Whatever you want to call him. Marcus's voice was sharp. I've done some research on your Mr. Brooks. He's a widow with a young daughter. How do I know he's not taking advantage of your situation? How do I know Sophie is safe in that house? Rachel's fear transformed into anger. You're questioning whether Sophie is safe? You, who doesn't even know her teacher's name? Who couldn't tell me her favorite color if your life depended on it? I'm her father. Being a father requires more than DNA and child support checks. Marcus, it requires showing up, paying attention, giving a damn about who your daughter actually is. Rachel was shaking now, years of suppressed anger pouring out. Ethan knows more about Sophie after 2 weeks than you've learned in 6 years. He knows she's afraid of the dark, so he got her a nightlight shaped like a moon. He knows she only likes strawberry yogurt, not blueberry. He knows she hums when she's concentrating on drawing. He knows her because he pays attention, because he cares. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Marcus said coldly. You're already emotionally dependent on this man. That's not stable, Rachel. That's desperate. I am desperate, Rachel shot back. I'm desperate to give my daughter a life where she feels loved and valued, where someone remembers her favorite things and shows up to her school events. You want to talk about stability? Stability isn't money, Marcus. It's presence. It's consistency. It's love. And Sophie has more of that living with me and Ethan than she ever got from you. She hung up before he could respond, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. When she got home that night, Ethan was still awake, reading in the living room. He took one look at her face and set down his book. What happened? Rachel told him about the call, about Marcus's accusations and her outburst. I shouldn't have lost my temper. I probably just gave him more ammunition. You told him the truth, Ethan said. There's power in that. The truth is that we're lying to everyone about how we met and why we're living together. The truth is that Sophie is loved and cared for. That part isn't a lie. Ethan stood and walked over to her. Rachel, I meant what I said in court. You and Sophie are welcome here for as long as you need. Not because we're maintaining a deception, but because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve support, and I have the means to provide it. Why? Rachel asked for what felt like the 100th time. Why are you doing this? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because when Sarah died, I fell apart, completely. I had a 3-year-old daughter who'd just lost her mother, and I could barely get out of bed in the morning. I was drowning in grief and terror, and I had no idea how to be both parents to Lucy. He paused, his hands clenching and unclenching. My neighbor Margaret, David's mom, she saved us. She showed up every morning for 6 months. She made breakfast. She helped me get Lucy ready for preschool. She sat with me while I cried. She didn't judge me for falling apart. She just helped. No conditions, no expectations. Just help. Rachel felt her throat tighten. When Margaret's husband died 2 years ago, I tried to do the same for her. I fixed things around her house. I brought her groceries. I checked on her every day. But it wasn't the same. Because she'd saved my life, and helping her with household chores didn't come close to repaying that debt. Ethan met Rachel's eyes. Then I met you, and I saw someone drowning the way I'd been drowning, someone fighting alone for their child the way I'd fought for Lucy. And I thought, this is how I pay Margaret back, by being for you what she was for me, by helping someone who needs it, no strings attached. Rachel couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. So yes, Ethan continued, we started with a lie, but what we're building now, that's real. You're really helping my business. Sophie and Lucy really are becoming family. We're really figuring out how to co-parent and share this space and support each other. The timeline was a lie. Everything else is true. I don't know how to do this, Rachel whispered. How to accept help. How to trust someone again. How to believe this isn't going to fall apart. One day at a time, Ethan said simply. We figure it out together. That night, lying in the guest room that was slowly becoming hers, Rachel thought about what Ethan had said, about grief and help, and paying kindness forward, about lies that became truth, and truth that looked like lies to people who'd forgotten what genuine care looked like. She thought about Marcus, who'd probably never understand that a home wasn't about money or square footage or appearing perfect to the outside world. A home was animal pancakes on Sunday mornings and pillow forts in lavender bedrooms, and someone knowing you were afraid of the dark without being told. She thought about Sophie, asleep in the bed next to hers, happy and safe and loved. And she thought about Ethan, who'd risked everything for a stranger because someone had once done the same for him. Rachel didn't know what their future looked like. She didn't know if Marcus would eventually discover the truth, or if the lie would hold long enough for it to become real, or if she and Ethan would ever figure out how to navigate this strange partnership they'd created. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she had hope. And people who saw her really saw her, not as invisible or inadequate, but as someone worth fighting for. That was enough. In the room next door, Ethan lay awake thinking similar thoughts. He hadn't planned on this, hadn't planned on opening his home to a woman and child he didn't know, hadn't planned on the way Lucy had bloomed with another little girl in the house, or the way the silence that had haunted his home since Sarah's death had been replaced with laughter and conversation and life. He thought about his wife, wondering what she would think of this situation. Sarah had always been the brave one, the one who took in strays and helped strangers and believed the best in people. She probably would have offered Rachel their home without a second thought. Ethan hoped he was honoring her memory by doing the same. He thought about the risk he was taking. If the truth came out, he could lose his business reputation, face legal consequences, maybe even lose custody of Lucy if the courts decided he'd shown poor judgment. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Lucy's face when she'd asked him to help Rachel, remembered the determination in her 6-year-old eyes when she'd said, "We have to help her keep her little girl, Daddy." His daughter had seen someone in pain and wanted to help. How could he teach her any lesson more important than that? So Ethan made a choice. He chose to believe that what they were building was worth the risk, that sometimes the right thing looked wrong on paper, but felt true in practice. That family wasn't always about biology or legal documents, but about who showed up, who stayed, who chose to love even when it was complicated. He chose to keep going, to keep building this strange, fragile thing they'd created, to see where it led. One day at a time, together. The reality of their new life hit hardest on the ordinary days. The mornings when Rachel woke to the smell of coffee already brewing and found Ethan in the kitchen packing lunches for both girls. The evenings when they fell into an easy rhythm of dinner preparation, one cooking while the other helped with homework. The weekends when Lucy's gymnastics schedule naturally merged with Sophie's art class, and suddenly they were coordinating carpools like they'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Rachel was organizing Ethan's quarterly tax documents when she found something that made her stop cold. It was a letter from his brother dated 6 months earlier, formal and cold in its legal language. Thomas Brooks was requesting reconsideration of the custody arrangement for Lucy Ann Brooks, citing his ability to provide a stable 2-parent household and superior financial resources. Rachel's hands trembled as she read the details. Thomas had tried to paint Ethan as incapable, overwhelmed, struggling. He'd documented every late pickup from school, every store-bought cookie at class parties instead of homemade ones, every time Ethan had asked neighbors for help. He'd built a case that said loving your daughter wasn't enough if you couldn't do it perfectly. Find something interesting? Rachel jumped, nearly dropping the letter. Ethan stood in the doorway of the office, still in his work clothes, covered in sawdust. "I'm sorry," Rachel said quickly. "I wasn't snooping. It was in with the tax receipts, and I thought it was financial documentation." Ethan's expression darkened when he saw what she was holding. "That's ancient history." The judge denied his petition. "Ethan, this is exactly what happened to me. He tried to take Lucy using the same tactics Marcus used on me." "I know." Ethan took the letter from her hands and tossed it in the recycling bin. "Why do you think I understood so quickly what you were facing? I've been there. I know what it feels like to have someone weaponize your struggles against you." Rachel stood, her mind racing. The things he documented, late pickups, asking neighbors for help, those aren't failures. Those are just life as a single parent. Try telling that to someone who's never had to do it alone. Ethan's voice was bitter. Thomas has a wife who doesn't work. They have a nanny, a housekeeper. He couldn't understand why I was struggling because he's never had to juggle a full-time business and full-time parenting simultaneously. What made the judge rule in your favor? Margaret testified. She explained that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That Lucy was thriving despite, or maybe because of, having a father who showed her that it's okay to need people. The judge saw through Thomas's perfect setup and recognized that Lucy was happy, healthy, and loved. Rachel thought about her own hearing, about how close she'd come to losing Sophie because the system valued appearance over reality. We're both living proof that the system is broken. Maybe, Ethan said, or maybe the system works exactly as designed, to favor people with resources over people with love. Either way, we found a loophole. By lying. By helping each other. Ethan met her eyes. Stop calling it a lie, Rachel. We live together. We co-parent. We support each other financially and emotionally. The only thing we lied about was when it started. Everything else is completely true. Before Rachel could respond, both girls came bursting into the office, faces flushed with excitement. Mommy, Daddy, we need to show you something. Lucy grabbed Ethan's hand while Sophie grabbed Rachel's, and they were pulled toward the living room where an elaborate art project covered the coffee table. We made a family tree for school, Sophie announced proudly. Everyone in our class has to make one. Rachel's stomach dropped. She looked down at the poster board covered in drawings and photographs. There was Marcus's photo on one branch labeled Sophie's first dad, and there, on another branch, was a drawing of Ethan labeled Sophie's second dad. Sophie, honey, Rachel started, her voice careful. Mr. Ethan isn't your dad. But he does dad stuff, Sophie said, her face scrunching in confusion. He makes me breakfast and helps with homework and comes to my school stuff. Emma's dad got remarried and now she has a stepmom, so if you and Mr. Ethan get married, he'll be my stepdad, right? We're not getting married, Rachel said quickly, acutely aware of Ethan standing frozen beside her. But you live together, and you're always talking in the kitchen after we go to bed, and last week you fell asleep on the couch watching a movie together. Sophie's logic was 6-year-old ironclad. That's what mommies and daddies do. Lucy jumped in, her face earnest. And my mommy died, so my daddy doesn't have a wife anymore. So you could be his new wife. Then Sophie would be my real sister instead of just my friend's sister. Rachel felt like the room was spinning. She looked at Ethan, desperate for help, but he seemed equally paralyzed. Girls, Ethan finally said, his voice strained, it's not that simple. Rachel and I are friends who are helping each other. That's different from being married. But why? Lucy asked, and there was something in her voice that made Rachel's heart break. Don't you like each other? Of course we like each other, Rachel said gently, but liking someone and being married are very different things. My teacher says family is who you choose to love, Sophie said stubbornly. And we choose each other, so we're family. There was no good answer to that, because Sophie was right. They had chosen each other in the strangest, most desperate way possible. But the choice had been about survival, not love. About keeping Sophie safe, not building a real family. Except somehow, without meaning to, that's exactly what they'd started to build. How about this? Ethan said, kneeling down to the girl's level. For your family tree, you can put whoever feels like family to you. If that includes all of us, that's okay. But remember that there are different kinds of family. There's the family you're born into, and the family you choose, and the family that chooses you. We're figuring out which kind we are. It was a diplomatic answer that satisfied neither girl but ended the immediate crisis. They went back to working on their projects, though Rachel noticed Sophie kept glancing between her and Ethan with a speculative look that suggested this conversation was far from over. That night, after the girls were in bed, Rachel found Ethan sitting on the back porch, staring out at the dark yard. She grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and joined him, handing him one without a word. They sat in silence for several minutes before Ethan spoke. I didn't think about this part, about how the girls would interpret our living situation. Me neither, Rachel admitted. I was so focused on convincing the court that I didn't think about convincing our daughters. They're not wrong, though. We do act like a family. We have dinner together every night. We coordinate schedules. We make decisions together about the girls. Hell, last week you rearranged my entire kitchen, and I didn't even question it because your system made more sense than mine. Rachel smiled despite herself. You had cereal in 3 different cabinets. It was chaos. It was my chaos. But Ethan was smiling too. My point is, we've fallen into this partnership that looks a lot like a marriage from the outside. Can we blame the girls for being confused? What do we do about it? Ethan took a long drink of his beer. I don't know. We can't explain the truth to them. They're 6. They'd never be able to keep that secret. But we also can't let them build up expectations that we're going to become some traditional blended family. Why not? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan turned to look at Rachel, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Because that's not what this is, he said finally. This is a practical arrangement to help each other. It's not... We're not what? Falling in love? Building a life together? Rachel heard the edge in her own voice and tried to soften it. I know this started as a lie. But Ethan, we've been living as a family for nearly a month now. At what point does the lie become the truth? When Sarah died, I promised myself I wouldn't do this again. Wouldn't let anyone else into that part of my life. It hurt too much to lose her. I'm not asking you to replace her, Rachel interrupted. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. I'm just saying maybe we need to acknowledge that what we're building here is real, even if it started fake. Ethan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared. Of what happens if this falls apart? Of what happens if Marcus finds out the truth? Of what happens if I let myself care about you and Sophie and then lose you the way I lost Sarah? Rachel reached over and took his hand. I'm scared too. Of depending on someone again. Of trusting someone who could hurt me. Of letting Sophie get attached to you and then having you decide this is too complicated and walk away. They sat there, hands clasped, both trembling with fear and honesty. So what do? Ethan asked. We keep going, one day at a time. We figure out what this is by living it, not by defining it. Rachel squeezed his hand. And we stop pretending this is temporary. Whether we call it a family or a partnership or a really elaborate roommate situation, we commit to making it work for as long as the girls need it to work. And if they need it to work forever? Rachel's heart skipped. Then I guess we figure out what forever looks like. The next morning brought a new crisis. Rachel was getting ready for her shift at the diner when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's teacher. Miss Moore, I wanted to give you a heads up. Sophie's father called the school this morning requesting information about her living situation and home life. Rachel's blood ran cold. What did you tell him? I told him that school policy prohibits sharing information about students' home situations with non-custodial parents without documentation from the courts. Mrs. Patterson's voice was carefully professional. But Ms. Moore, he was quite insistent. He made some concerning implications about Sophie's safety and well-being. Sophie is perfectly safe. I know that. I see Sophie every day. She's thriving. Her grades have improved. She's more engaged in class. She seems happier and more confident. Whatever changes you've made in the past month are clearly positive. Mrs. Patterson paused. But I wanted you to know that Mr. Hoffman seems to be building some kind of case. He asked very specific questions about pickup and drop-off patterns, who attends parent-teacher conferences, whether Sophie mentions any concerning situations at home. Thank you for letting me know. Rachel's mind was racing. Is there anything else I should be aware of? Just that Sophie's family tree project is due next week. Given the situation, you might want to review it with her before she turns it in. After hanging up, Rachel went straight to Ethan's office. He was on the phone with a supplier but took one look at her face and cut the call short. What happened? Rachel told him about Mrs. Patterson's call. He's investigating us, looking for evidence that we're lying or that Sophie isn't safe. He won't find anything because there's nothing to find. Sophie is safe, happy, and cared for. But what about the family tree? What if he sees that Sophie drew you as her second dad? He'll use that to argue that we're confusing her or that we're misrepresenting our relationship or... Rachel. Ethan stood and put his hands on her shoulders. Breathe. We knew he wouldn't give up easily. We knew he'd look for ammunition, so we make sure there is no ammunition to find. How? By living exactly the life we told the court we were living. by being so consistent and so careful that even if he hires a private investigator to follow us, all they'll see is two people co-parenting and sharing a house. What about the family tree? Ethan thought for a moment. Talk to Sophie. Explain that some things are private, family things that we don't share with everyone. She can make a simpler version for school if she wants. But Rachel, don't make her feel like what we have is something to hide or be ashamed of. He was right. The last thing Rachel wanted was to teach Sophie that their family, whatever it was something shameful. That afternoon, Rachel sat down with Sophie to talk about the family tree project. Her daughter listened solemnly as Rachel explained that some families were complicated and that not everyone would understand how their family worked. Is it because we're lying? Sophie asked with the blunt honesty of childhood. Rachel's heart stopped. What do you mean? Lucy told me that her daddy helped you tell the judge you lived here even though you really just met. She said it was a good lie to keep me safe, but that we can't tell anyone because then the judge would be mad. Rachel closed her eyes. Of course Lucy had told Sophie. Of course the girls had talked about it. They told each other everything. Who else knows? Rachel asked carefully. Nobody. Lucy said it's a secret just for us, like a spy mission. Sophie looked worried. Did I do something wrong by telling you? No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Rachel pulled Sophie into her lap. But Lucy's right that it's something private, just for our family. Do you understand why? Sophie nodded against Rachel's chest. Because if people know you just met Mr. Ethan, they might think you can't take care of me, but you can. You're the best mommy ever. Thank you, sweetheart. Rachel kissed the top of Sophie's head, her mind reeling with the implications. The girls knew. They'd known, probably from the beginning, and they'd kept the secret because they understood what was at stake. For your family tree, Rachel said gently, maybe we can make two versions. One for school that just shows the basic family, and one for our house that shows everyone who feels like family. Would that be okay? Sophie considered this. Can the house one have Mr. Ethan and Lucy? Of course. And can we keep it forever? The house one, even when I'm grown up? Rachel felt tears prickling her eyes. Yes, we can keep it forever. That evening, after both girls were asleep, Rachel told Ethan about her conversation with Sophie, about how Lucy had explained everything, about how both girls had been keeping their secret. They're 6, Ethan said, sounding stunned. How are they this smart? Because they've both had to grow up faster than they should have. Lucy lost her mother. Sophie watched her parents' marriage fall apart. They understand that sometimes adults have to make hard choices to protect the people they love. Ethan sat down heavily on the couch. This is insane. We've got 2 6-year-olds running counterintelligence operations to protect our custody fraud. It's not fraud, Rachel said, using his own words. It's helping each other. Remember? Tell that to a judge if Marcus figures it out. He won't. We're too careful. We've built something real here. Rachel sat beside him. Ethan, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for this to fall apart and start actually planning for a future. What kind of future? The kind where I'm not sleeping in your guest room indefinitely. The kind where we figure out if this partnership could become something more permanent. The kind where we're honest with each other about what we want this to be. Ethan looked at her, and Rachel saw fear and longing warring in his expression. What do you want it to be? I want it to be real, Rachel said simply. I want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for permission to be part of this family. I want to know that a year from now or 5 years from now, Sophie and I will still have this home. That Lucy will still be Sophie's sister. That we'll still be figuring out life together. That's a lot to commit to based on a month of knowing each other. We committed to lying to a judge based on one night of knowing each other. This seems less risky. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Fair point. I'm not asking you to marry me, Rachel continued. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me or replace Sarah or be something you're not ready to be. I'm just asking if you can see a future where this arrangement becomes permanent, where we're really co-parenting, really sharing this house, really building a life together. Ethan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. When Sarah died, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd just exist in this half state, going through the motions for Lucy's sake, but never really living again. And I was okay with that. It felt like what I deserved for not being able to save her. He paused, his hands clenching and unclenching. Then you showed up. You and Sophie, with your desperate eyes and your impossible situation. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose. I felt needed. I felt alive. Rachel held her breath. So yes, Ethan said, I can see a future where this becomes permanent, where we figure out how to be a real family instead of a fake one, where Sophie and Lucy grow up as sisters and we grow old arguing about whose turn it is to drive them to soccer practice. You can see all that? I'm starting to. Ethan turned to face her fully. But Rachel, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we make this real, I need to know you're in it for the right reasons. Not because you're grateful, or because you need stability, or because it's convenient, but because you actually want this life with me. I do want it, Rachel said. I want Saturday morning pancakes and family movie nights, and girls who share each other's secrets. I want someone who knows how I take my coffee and doesn't mind that I reorganize cabinets and shows up to school events even when they're not his kids' events. I want this messy, complicated, beautiful thing we've accidentally created. Even though it started with a lie? Especially because it started with a lie. Because we took something desperate and impossible and turned it into something real and good. Because we chose each other when we had every reason not to. That feels more honest than any relationship that started conventionally. Ethan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Rachel's ear, and the gentleness of the gesture made her chest ache. Okay, he said softly. Let's do this. Let's make it real. Just like that? Just like that. He smiled, and it was the first real, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. We've already committed fraud together. Might as well commit to actually building a life together, too. Rachel laughed, and then she was crying, and then Ethan was pulling her into his arms, and they were both laughing and crying and holding each other like they'd found something precious they'd thought was lost forever. Neither of them heard the soft footsteps on the stairs or saw Lucy and Sophie peeking around the corner, watching with satisfied smiles before creeping back to bed. The girls had known all along how this would end. Sometimes children understood what adults needed before the adults did. Over the following days, something shifted. The careful boundaries they'd maintained began to blur. Ethan's hand would rest on Rachel's shoulder as she cooked dinner. Rachel would lean against him while they watched the girls play in the backyard. They'd catch each other's eyes across the room and smile, sharing private jokes and observations that felt like their own language. It wasn't love yet. They both knew that. Love took time and trust and 1,000 small moments of choosing each other. But it was the beginning of something that could become love if they were brave enough to let it. The test came sooner than expected. 2 days after their conversation, Marcus called to inform Rachel that he was exercising his right to a home visit. He wanted to see where Sophie was living, to verify the living conditions for himself. When? Rachel asked, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I'll be bringing my attorney. Rachel wanted to argue, to refuse, but she knew that would only make things worse. Fine. We'll be here. After she hung up, she told Ethan. He took the news calmly, immediately switching into planning mode. Okay, we need to make sure everything supports our story. Your clothes need to be clearly established in the guest room. We need evidence of your work in the office. Sophie's artwork on the fridge, her books in her room. We need this house to look exactly like what we told the judge it was. It already does, Rachel pointed out. Because we've been living it. I know, but Marcus is going to be looking for holes in our story. We can't give him any. They spent the evening preparing. Rachel made sure her toiletries were arranged in the guest bathroom, her clothes hung in the closet, her books on the nightstand. Ethan organized the office to highlight Rachel's work, the filing systems she'd created, the invoices she'd processed, the organized receipts that proved she was genuinely helping with the business. Sophie's presence was everywhere already, her dragon drawings taped to the walls, her favorite books on the shelf, her shoes by the door next to Lucy's. The house looked exactly like what it was, a home where 2 families had merged into one. That night, Ethan found Rachel sitting on her bed, staring at nothing. You okay? What if he finds something? What if Sophie says the wrong thing? What if... Rachel. Ethan sat beside her. We've got this. Sophie knows this is her home. Lucy knows this is her home. There's nothing for Marcus to find because we're not hiding anything. We really do live here. We really are a family. A family built on a lie. A family built on choosing each other when we had every reason not to. Ethan took her hand. Stop calling it a lie. The timeline was a lie. Everything else is the most honest thing either of us has done in years. Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm scared. Me too. But we face it together. They sat there in the quiet house, listening to the sounds of both girls sleeping peacefully down the hall, and drew strength from what they'd built. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it as partners, as family. And that, Rachel realized, was the truest thing of all. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Rachel had been watching the clock since noon, her stomach twisted in knots despite Ethan's reassurances. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her shirt, and opened the door. Marcus stood on the porch in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly salary at the diner. Beside him was James Porter, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of professional skepticism. Behind them, to Rachel's surprise, was a woman she didn't recognize, middle-aged, with kind eyes and a clipboard. Marcus? James. Rachel kept her voice neutral. Who's this? Ms. Chen is a social worker, Porter said. We've requested an independent evaluation of the living conditions. Rachel's heart sank, but she stepped aside. Of course. Please come in. Ethan appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He'd deliberately dressed in work clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, to emphasize that this was a regular Saturday afternoon, not a staged performance. Mr. Hoffman, Ethan said, extending his hand. Marcus looked at it like it might be contaminated, but shook it briefly. I'm Ethan Brooks. Welcome to our home. The possessive "our" wasn't lost on anyone. Porter's eyes narrowed slightly, but the social worker, Ms. Chen, though Rachel wondered if she was related to David and Margaret, simply made a note on her clipboard. This is a lovely home, Ms. Chen said, her voice genuinely warm. How long have you lived here, Mr. Brooks? 8 years. I bought it right after I got married. My late wife and I raised our daughter here. I'm sorry for your loss. Ms. Chen's sympathy seemed genuine. And Ms. Moore, you've been living here for approximately 2 months? Yes. Ethan offered me and Sophie a place to stay while I got back on my feet financially. I see. And where's Sophie now? Upstairs with Lucy, Ethan's daughter. They're working on a school project. May I see their room? Rachel's pulse quickened. This was the first test. Of course. This way. As they climbed the stairs, Rachel could hear the girls' voices. Sophie's animated explanation of her dragon comic book. Lucy's enthusiastic responses. The sound was so natural, so genuine, that Rachel felt a flash of anger at Marcus for making this necessary. Their daughters were happy. Wasn't that enough? Ms. Chen paused at the top of the stairs, taking in the photos on the wall. There were pictures of Lucy as a baby with her mother, family photos of Ethan and Sarah, and newer additions, recent photos of all 4 of them at the park, at Lucy's gymnastics meet, making pancakes in the kitchen. Rachel had added those herself last week, not for show, but because they felt right. Mommy! Sophie spotted them and jumped up, running to Rachel. Come see what we made! We drew a whole castle with a dragon family living in it. Lucy was right behind her. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Ms. Chen. Are you here to see our project? I am, Ms. Chen said, smiling at the girls. But first, can you show me where you sleep? I sleep here, Lucy said proudly, gesturing to her lavender room. And Sophie sleeps in the guest room, but we're neighbors so we can talk through the wall at night. We have a code, Sophie added. 3 knocks means good night, 2 knocks means are you awake, and 1 knock means I'm scared, can you come over? Ms. Chen made another note. That's very clever. Can you show me your room, Sophie? Sophie led them to the guest room, chattering the whole way. This used to be just for visitors, but now it's mine and Mommy's room. See, that's my bed and that's Mommy's bed. I have my own shelf for my books and my drawing supplies, and Mommy lets me put my artwork on the walls. The room did look lived in. Sophie's drawings covered one wall. Her books were stacked on the nightstand. Her stuffed animals were arranged on her pillow. Rachel's side was more sparse but clearly occupied. A few books, her phone charger, a framed photo of her and Sophie from 2 years ago. "Do you like living here, Sophie?" Ms. Chen asked gently. "I love it. Lucy's my best friend, and Mr. Ethan makes really good pancakes, and I have my own shelf in the bathroom for my toothbrush and everything." Sophie's enthusiasm was completely unforced. "It's way better than living in the car." Rachel winced. Marcus's expression darkened. "You told her she was living in the car?" he demanded. "I didn't lie to my daughter about our situation," Rachel said evenly. "She knew we were going through a hard time. She deserved honesty. She's 6 years old. She's 6 years old and smarter than you give her credit for." Rachel kept her voice calm. "She understood that Mommy lost her job and we had to stay in the car for a little while. She also understood that I was working hard to fix it, which I did." Ms. Chen held up a hand. "Let's continue the tour, shall we?" Downstairs, she examined the kitchen, the living room, Ethan's office. In each room, there was evidence of the life they'd built. Sophie's homework on the kitchen table next to Lucy's, a shared chore chart on the refrigerator with both girls' names, family movie night DVDs stacked by the TV. In the office, Rachel's organized filing system and the desk where she clearly worked. "You help Mr. Brooks with his business?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Yes, I handle invoicing, scheduling, vendor management, bookkeeping. Ethan's excellent at construction, but less excellent at paperwork." Rachel managed a small smile. "It's a good trade. He provides housing, I provide administrative support, and we split the cost of groceries and utilities. So this is a business arrangement." Rachel and Ethan exchanged a glance. They'd prepared for this question. "It started that way," Ethan said carefully. "But it's become more than that. We're partners. In parenting, in running a household, in building a life that works for both our daughters." "Are you romantically involved?" Another loaded question. Porter was watching them like a hawk, waiting for them to slip up. "We're navigating a complex situation," Rachel said. "We care about each other. We're committed to making this household work. Whether that becomes something more romantic in the future, we're not sure yet. We're taking things slow for the girls' sake." It was the truth, or at least close enough. They had decided to build something real, but they weren't rushing into labels or definitions. Ms. Chen nodded, making notes. "I'd like to speak with Sophie alone, if that's all right." Rachel's heart jumped into her throat, but she forced herself to nod. "Of course." While Ms. Chen took Sophie into the living room, Rachel, Ethan, and Marcus stood in awkward silence in the kitchen. Porter had wandered off to examine the house more closely, probably looking for evidence of deception. "This is quite the setup you've got," Marcus said finally, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very cozy. Very convenient." "It works for us," Ethan said mildly. "I'm sure it does. Free housing, free childcare, free administrative assistant. You're getting quite a deal, Mr. Brooks." "Actually, I'm getting a partner who makes my business run smoothly and my daughter happy. That's worth more than money." "How noble." Marcus's lip curled. "Tell me, how long do you think this arrangement will last? A few months? A year? What happens when you get tired of playing house with someone else's family?" "Marcus, stop," Rachel said quietly. "No, I won't stop. Our daughter deserves stability, not some temporary experiment in communal living. She deserves a real home with real parents who are actually committed to each other." "You mean like the real home you provide?" Rachel's voice was sharp now. "The one where you don't know her teacher's name or her favorite color or what she wants to be when she grows up? That kind of real home?" "I work 80 hours a week to provide for her financially. And I work 2 jobs to provide for her emotionally. Guess which one she actually needs more?" "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You're unstable, Rachel. You're living with a man you barely know, depending on his charity, teaching our daughter that this kind of arrangement is normal. I know him better after 2 months than I knew you after 7 years of marriage." Rachel's voice was steel now. "I know he shows up. I know he pays attention. I know he doesn't measure love in dollar signs and square footage. And yes, I'm teaching Sophie that this is normal, that family is about choice and commitment, not just biology and legal documents." "Enough," Ethan said quietly, but with authority. "Mr. Hoffman, you're in my home. You're welcome to evaluate whether it's suitable for your daughter, but you're not welcome to attack Rachel's character or our choices." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Porter reappeared, shaking his head slightly. He'd clearly found nothing useful in his examination. Miss Chen emerged from the living room with Sophie, who immediately ran to Rachel. "I told Miss Chen all about our family," Sophie announced. "About how Mr. Ethan helps me with math homework, and how Lucy and I are going to be in the same class next year, and how Mommy tucks me in every night and reads me stories." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Rachel said, smoothing Sophie's hair. Miss Chen looked at Marcus, then at Rachel and Ethan. Her expression was professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she'd already made up her mind. "Thank you for your time," she said. "I have everything I need for my report." After they left, Rachel collapsed onto the couch, all the adrenaline draining from her body at once. Ethan sat beside her, and they stayed like that for several minutes, not speaking, just breathing. "Did we pass?" Rachel finally asked. "I don't know, but we told the truth. That's all we could do." Sophie and Lucy crept into the room, their faces worried. "Is Daddy mad at you, Mommy?" Sophie asked quietly. Rachel pulled her daughter onto her lap. "Your father is just concerned about you, baby. He wants to make sure you're safe and happy." "But I am safe and happy. I told the nice lady that. I told her this is the best place I've ever lived." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. Did I do good? Did I help?" "You did perfect." Rachel kissed the top of Sophie's head. "You just told the truth. That's all anyone can ask." The report came 3 days later. Ms. Chen had found the living situation to be stable, appropriate, and beneficial to the child's well-being. She noted that Sophie appeared happy, healthy, and well-adjusted, that the home was clean and safe, and that both Rachel and Ethan demonstrated appropriate parenting skills and genuine affection for both children. The final line of the report hit Rachel like a gift. While the household arrangement is unconventional, it appears to be functioning successfully. The child has benefited from the increased stability and support system. No concerns noted. Rachel read it 3 times, unable to believe it was real. "We won," she whispered. "We told the truth, and we won," Ethan corrected. He was reading over her shoulder, his hand resting on her back. "Because what we have here is real, Rachel. The social worker saw that. Even your ex-husband saw it, which is why he's so angry. What do we do now? We keep living, we keep building, we figure out what this family looks like long term." That conversation happened over the next several weeks. They talked about finances, about how to formally structure their arrangement. Rachel insisted on paying rent and contributing to household expenses once she'd saved enough from both jobs. Ethan resisted at first, but Rachel was firm. "If this is going to be real, it needs to be equal," she said. "I'm not your charity case. I'm your partner." They talked about the girls, about coordinating their schedules and managing their activities. Lucy wanted to take art classes with Sophie. Sophie wanted to join Lucy's book club. They were weaving their lives together in ways that made separation impossible to imagine. They talked about their own relationship, the undefined space between friends and partners and co-parents. They went on their first official date 3 weeks after the home visit, dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, while Margaret watched both girls. It was strange and wonderful, talking without interruption, learning about each other's lives before desperation threw them together. "I wanted to be a lawyer," Rachel admitted over pasta. "That's why I became a legal secretary. I thought I'd work my way through law school, but then I got pregnant, and Marcus made it clear that his career had to come first. Someone had to sacrifice, and it was always going to be me." "What stopped you from going back to school after the divorce?" "Money, time, fear, mostly. Fear that I'd invested so many years in being Mrs. Marcus Hoffman that I'd forgotten how to be just Rachel Moore." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I see Rachel Moore. I see someone brilliant and capable and strong enough to fight for what matters. If you want to go to law school, we'll figure out how to make it happen." "Just like that?" "Just like that. We're partners. Your dreams matter as much as mine." Rachel felt something crack open in her chest, some walls she'd built to protect herself from disappointment. "What about you? What dreams did you give up?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to design buildings, not just build them. I studied architecture in college. But Sarah got sick during my senior year, cancer, her first battle with it, and I dropped out to take care of her. When she went into remission, we got married, had Lucy, started the construction business. The cancer came back when Lucy was 3, and this time, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I'm sorry, Rachel said softly. Don't be. I got Lucy out of it. I got 7 years with the love of my life. That's more than some people ever get. Ethan squeezed her hand. But sometimes I look at buildings and imagine what I could have created, the spaces I could have designed. Maybe you still can. Maybe we both can reclaim the dreams we set aside. Maybe. Ethan smiled. Or maybe we build new dreams together. They talked until the restaurant started closing, then sat in Ethan's truck in the parking lot, still talking, about their childhoods and their failures and their hopes, about what scared them and what they wanted for their daughters. I don't want Sophie to grow up thinking she has to make herself smaller to make room for someone else's ambitions, Rachel said. I don't want her to think love means sacrifice and silence. I don't want Lucy to grow up thinking losing people is inevitable, Ethan said. I don't want her to be afraid to love because love ends in grief. So we teach them better. We show them that love is also about showing up and paying attention and choosing each other every day. Is that what we're doing? Choosing each other? Rachel turned to look at him in the darkness of the truck. I think we've been choosing each other since the night you offered me your house. We just didn't call it that yet. Ethan leaned across the console and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. Rachel kissed him back, and it felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, both of them were trembling. We should take this slow, Ethan said. For the girls, for us. Make sure this is real and not just proximity and gratitude. Agreed. But Ethan, I think this is real. I think it's been real for a while now. Me too. They drove home holding hands, and when they walked in the door, Margaret smiled knowingly, but said nothing. The girls were asleep on the couch, curled up together like puppies, and the sight of them made Rachel's chest ache with love and fear and hope. They were building something precious and fragile, something that could break if they weren't careful, but something worth fighting for. The final test came from an unexpected source. A week after their first date, Rachel got a call from Morrison and Associates, the law firm where she'd worked before being laid off. Ms. Moore, this is Harold Morrison. I wanted to reach out personally to offer you your position back. We're expanding again, and we need experienced legal secretaries. Your old salary plus 15%, better benefits. I know the layoff was difficult, and I'd like to make it right. Rachel's mind reeled. Her old job back, financial security, a career path that could actually lead somewhere. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, take a few days, but Rachel, I hope you'll consider it. You were one of our best. After hanging up, Rachel sat at Ethan's desk, their desk now, and stared at the organized files she'd created. She thought about the work she'd been doing, the systems she'd built, the way Ethan relied on her expertise. She thought about the flexibility of working from home, being available when the girls got out of school, having control over her own schedule. She thought about her dreams of law school and which path would actually get her there. That evening, she told Ethan about the offer. You should take it, he said immediately. It's a great opportunity. Better pay, better benefits. But I like what I'm doing here. I like working for myself, setting my own hours, being present for the girls. And Ethan, I've been thinking about taking some online classes, business management, maybe accounting, building actual skills that could turn this into a real career, not just a job. You could do that and work at the firm. I could, but I don't want to. Rachel took his hand. When I worked at Morrison and Associates, I was always trying to be invisible. Don't make waves. Don't ask for too much. Don't take up space. Here, with you, I'm building something that's mine. I'm visible. I matter. I don't want to go back to being invisible. Ethan pulled her close. You're not invisible. You've never been invisible. But Rachel, I don't want you to give up opportunities because of me. I'm not giving anything up. I'm choosing what I want. For the first time in my adult life, I'm choosing. She pulled back to look at him. I want to build this business with you. I want to turn it into something bigger. I want to go to school on my own terms, at my own pace. I want a life I'm creating, not a job I'm settling for. Are you sure? I'm sure. Rachel called Morrison the next day and politely declined. She felt lighter afterward, like she'd finally stopped running from her old life and started building her new one. 2 months after the home visit, Marcus's lawyer sent a formal letter acknowledging that the custody arrangement would remain unchanged. Reading between the lines, Rachel understood that Marcus had given up. He'd investigated, he'd challenged, he'd tried to find evidence of instability or deception, and he'd found nothing but a family that worked. "It's over," Rachel said, showing Ethan the letter. "He's actually giving up." "He's recognizing reality," Ethan corrected, "which is that Sophie is exactly where she belongs." That weekend, they celebrated with a family dinner: Rachel, Ethan, Sophie, Lucy, Margaret, and David Chen. The table was crowded and loud, filled with laughter and conversation and the easy intimacy of people who'd chosen to be family. After dinner, while the girls played in the yard and the adults cleaned up, Margaret pulled Rachel aside. "My son told me about your case," she said quietly. "About how it started." Rachel's heart stopped. "Margaret, I'm not judging you. I'm thanking you." Margaret's eyes were bright with emotion. 3 years ago, I watched Ethan nearly destroy himself with grief. I watched him forget how to live, how to hope, how to imagine a future beyond just surviving for Lucy's sake. You brought him back to life. "He saved me first," Rachel said. "He gave me everything when I had nothing. And you gave him purpose. You reminded him that love doesn't end with loss, that family can be built from choice, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone help us." Margaret squeezed Rachel's hand. "Whatever brought you two together, what you've built is real. Don't ever doubt that." That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Rachel and Ethan sat on the back porch like they had that first night, watching the stars. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, "about making this permanent." Rachel's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean legally, officially. I want to talk to a lawyer about formalizing our partnership. Not marriage necessarily, but a legal agreement that protects both of us and both girls, that recognizes this family we've built." "You want to legally bind yourself to me?" "I want to stop pretending this is temporary. I want to acknowledge what we both know, that you and Sophie are permanent fixtures in our lives, that we're building something that's meant to last." Rachel felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I want that too." "Yeah. Yeah." She turned to face him, taking both his hands. "Ethan, I need you to know something. I'm falling in love with you. Not because you saved me, not because I'm grateful, but because you see me, because you make me laugh, because you're the best father I've ever seen, and watching you with both girls makes my heart hurt in the best way. Because this life we're building feels more real than anything I've ever had." Ethan kissed her then, deep and certain, and when they pulled apart, he was smiling. "I'm falling in love with you too. Have been for weeks, probably. I kept telling myself it was too soon, too complicated, but Rachel, loving you is the least complicated thing in my life. Everything else is hard. Loving you is easy." They sat there under the stars, holding each other, and for the first time since this all began, Rachel let herself believe it was real. Not the lie they'd told the court, but the truth they'd built in spite of it. A family created from desperation and courage, and the simple act of choosing to help someone who needed it. A home built on honesty about what mattered, even if the timeline had been a lie. A love that had started as a practical arrangement and transformed into something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. It was messy and complicated and unconventional and absolutely, undeniably real. And it was theirs. 6 months had passed since that night on the porch, and Rachel still sometimes woke up expecting to find herself back in her car, the whole thing nothing but a desperate dream. But then she'd hear the sounds of the house coming to life, Ethan's shower running, the girls giggling in Lucy's room, the coffee maker beeping in the kitchen, and she'd remember that this was real. This was her life now. She was in the office going through vendor contracts when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. "Ms. Moore, this is Jennifer Walsh from Silver Creek Elementary. I'm calling about Sophie and Lucy." Rachel's heart jumped into her throat. What's wrong? Are they hurt? No, nothing like that. But there's been an incident. Both girls are fine physically, but I need you and Mr. Brooks to come to the school as soon as possible. 20 minutes later, Rachel and Ethan sat in Principal Walsh's office while both girls sat outside looking unusually somber. The principal was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the weary expression of someone who'd seen everything. Let me start by saying that both Sophie and Lucy are excellent students, Walsh began. This is the first time either has been in my office for disciplinary reasons. What happened? Ethan asked. Walsh sighed. There was an altercation at lunch. Another student, Tyler Morrison, made some comments about Sophie's family situation. Specifically, he said that Sophie's dad didn't want her and that she was living with strangers because her mom couldn't afford to take care of her. Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Where did he hear that? From his mother, apparently. Mrs. Morrison works at the courthouse. She was there the day of your custody hearing. Walsh's expression was sympathetic. Tyler repeated what he'd overheard his mother saying, and Lucy took exception to his characterization. What did Lucy do? Ethan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. She punched him in the nose. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Rachel felt a flash of pride. Ethan covered his mouth, and she suspected he was hiding a smile. And Sophie? Rachel asked. Sophie told Tyler that her family was perfect, and that he was jealous because his parents were getting divorced and fighting over who had to keep him. Walsh raised an eyebrow, which, unfortunately, is also true. Mrs. Morrison is going through a difficult separation. So both girls are suspended? Ethan asked. Normally, yes, violence is taken very seriously. However, given the circumstances, the provocation, the fact that Tyler was bullying another student about a sensitive topic, and Lucy's otherwise spotless record, I'm inclined to give them both a warning and a week of lunch detention instead. Rachel exhaled in relief. Thank you. But I do need to address something with you both. Walsh leaned forward, her expression serious. Your family situation is unconventional. That's going to make your daughters targets for gossip and judgment, especially from people who don't understand. You need to prepare them for that. Give them tools to handle comments without resorting to violence. We will, Ethan promised. But Principal Walsh, with respect, our daughters shouldn't have to defend their family. They should be protected from bullying, regardless of who the bullying is about. You're absolutely right, and Tyler will face appropriate consequences for his behavior. But the reality is that people talk, and children repeat what they hear. The best thing you can do is make sure Sophie and Lucy are secure enough in their family that outside comments can't shake that foundation. After collecting both girls, they drove home in silence. Rachel kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Sophie and Lucy, who were holding hands in the back seat. Are we in trouble? Lucy finally asked in a small voice. Yes, Ethan said. Lucy, you cannot hit people, no matter what they say. But he said mean things about Sophie. He said she didn't have a real family. We do too have a real family, Sophie said fiercely. We have the realest family ever. Rachel's throat tightened. Girls, you're not wrong to be upset. Tyler said hurtful things, but hitting him wasn't the right response. What should I have done? Lucy asked. Just let him be mean? You could have told a teacher. You could have walked away. You could have told Tyler that he was wrong without using violence. Ethan glanced back at his daughter. But Luce, I also want you to know that I understand why you did it. You were protecting your sister. That instinct to defend the people you love, that's a good thing. We just need to channel it differently. Sophie's really my sister? Lucy's voice was hopeful. Not just my friend's sister? Rachel and Ethan exchanged a look. They'd been dancing around this question for months, never quite defining what their family was. Yes, Rachel said firmly. Sophie is really your sister. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And that's just as real. When they got home, Rachel sat both girls down at the kitchen table while Ethan made hot chocolate. She'd been preparing for this conversation for weeks, knowing it would eventually be necessary. We need to talk about our family, Rachel began, about how it started and what it means. Both girls looked at her with wide, serious eyes. You both know that Mr. Ethan, that your dad, Rachel corrected, watching Ethan's face soften at the word. Helped Mommy when we needed it. He offered us a place to stay when we didn't have one. And you helped Daddy with his business and made our house not so quiet anymore, Lucy added. Exactly. We helped each other. And somewhere along the way, we became a real family. Rachel took a deep breath. But not everyone understands that. Some people think families have to look a certain way. A mom and a dad who got married first, who knew each other for years before having kids, who fit into a neat little box. Our family doesn't fit in a box, Sophie observed. No, it doesn't. And that's okay. But it means some people might say things, might question whether we're a real family, might suggest that there's something wrong with how we live. Like Tyler, Lucy said darkly. Like Tyler. And when that happens, you need to remember something very important. Rachel looked at both girls. What other people think about our family doesn't matter. What matters is what we know. We know we love each other. We know we show up for each other. We know we're committed to being together. That's what makes a family real. But what if they keep saying mean things? Sophie asked. Ethan set mugs of hot chocolate in front of each girl. Then you remember what Principal Walsh said. You use your words, not your fists. You tell them they're wrong. You explain that family is about love and choice, not just biology. And if they still don't understand, you walk away knowing that their ignorance is their problem, not yours. But what if I want to punch them anyway? Lucy asked. Despite everything, Rachel laughed. Then you come home and tell us about it, and we'll help you figure out a better way to handle it. Deal? Deal, both girls chorused. That night, after the girls were in bed, Rachel found Ethan in the garage working on a project he'd been building for weeks. It was a custom bookshelf, she realized, sized perfectly for both girls' rooms combined. When are you planning to give them that? She asked. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe we could convert the guest room into a proper bedroom for both of them. They sleep in the same room half the time anyway. We could get bunk beds, paint the walls, whatever color they want, make it officially theirs. He looked up at her. If that's okay with you. Rachel felt tears prickling her eyes. Where would I sleep? Ethan set down his tools and walked over to her. I was hoping you'd sleep in my room, with me, if you're ready for that. Ethan, I know we said we'd take things slow, and we have been. But Rachel, it's been 6 months. We're already living as a family. We're already committed to each other. The only thing we're not doing is being honest about the fact that we're together. Really together. What about the girls? The girls have been asking when you're going to be my girlfriend for months. They'll be thrilled. Ethan took her hands. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you're my roommate and start acknowledging that you're my partner. In every way. Rachel thought about the guest room that had never really felt like hers. About the night she'd lain awake wishing she could cross the hall to where Ethan slept. About the careful distance they'd maintained for propriety's sake, even though everyone already assumed they were together. Yes, she said. Yes, I'm ready. They told the girls the next morning over breakfast. The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Finally, Sophie exclaimed, Lucy and I have been waiting forever. We made a bet, Lucy added. I said you'd figure it out by Christmas. Sophie said Thanksgiving. I won. You two bet on us? Rachel asked, torn between amusement and exasperation. Mrs. Chen said it was obvious you loved each other, Sophie explained. We were just waiting for you to catch up. The transition was surprisingly easy. Rachel moved her clothes into Ethan's room that weekend, and the girls helped pick out paint colors for their new shared bedroom. They chose purple with silver stars on the ceiling and immediately began planning how to arrange their furniture. We need the bunk beds by the window so we can see outside, Lucy declared. And we need a big shelf for all our books, Sophie added, and a desk for drawing and homework. Watching them plan their shared space, Rachel felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not conventional, but real and chosen and filled with love. The legal formalization of their partnership came a month later. They met with David Chen, who'd helped them navigate the custody hearing to draw up papers that would protect both of them and both girls. What you're creating is essentially a domestic partnership agreement, David explained. It establishes that you're co-parenting both children, sharing financial responsibilities, and making joint decisions about the household. In the event that anything happens to one of you, it ensures the other has legal standing to continue caring for both girls. What about custody? Rachel asked. If something happened to me, would Marcus be able to take Sophie? Not unless he could prove that living with Ethan was detrimental to her well-being. And given the history, the established relationship, and Sophie's clear preference, that would be very difficult for him to do. David paused. Have you considered adoption? If Ethan adopted Sophie, it would eliminate that uncertainty entirely. Rachel looked at Ethan, her heart pounding. Would you want that? Rachel, I've been Sophie's father in every way that matters for months now. Making it legal would just acknowledge what's already true. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. If you're comfortable with it, if Sophie wants it, then yes. I would be honored to adopt her. They asked Sophie that evening, sitting her down in the living room with Lucy present. Sophie, you know how Lucy calls Ethan Daddy? Rachel began. Yeah, sometimes I want to call him that too, but I wasn't sure if I was allowed. Sophie's voice was small. Ethan pulled her onto his lap. You're absolutely allowed. If you want to call me Dad, I would love that. And we wanted to ask you something. How would you feel if I officially became your dad? If we did the legal paperwork that would make you my daughter for real? Sophie's eyes went wide. Like adoption? Like in the movies? Exactly like that. But I already have a dad, my first dad. You do, Rachel said carefully, and that won't change. Marcus will always be your biological father. But Sophie, being someone's parent, is about more than biology. It's about who shows up, who loves you, who takes care of you every day. Ethan has been doing that. This would just make it official. Sophie thought about this, her face serious. Would I have to stop seeing my first dad? No. He'd still have his visitation time if he wants it. He doesn't really want it, though, Sophie said with the blunt honesty of a child. He cancels a lot. And when I do go there, he just lets his wife take care of me while he works. Rachel's heart broke for her daughter, but she kept her voice steady. That's his choice, sweetheart. But it doesn't have to be yours. You get to choose who you want to call Dad. Sophie looked at Ethan, then at Lucy, then back at Rachel. If Dad adopts me, then Lucy and I would really be sisters? Like legal sisters? Yes, Ethan said. Legal sisters. Okay. Sophie nodded decisively. I want that. I want Dad to adopt me, and I want Lucy to be my real sister forever. Lucy threw her arms around Sophie, both girls dissolving into excited giggles and plans for how they'd announce their official sisterhood at school. The adoption process took 4 months. Marcus contested it initially, more out of principle than genuine desire to maintain custody. But when faced with the reality of Sophie's clear preference and his own documented lack of involvement, he eventually withdrew his objection. Rachel suspected his new wife had convinced him that letting go was easier than fighting a battle he couldn't win. The day the adoption was finalized, they celebrated with a party. Margaret came, along with several of Ethan's construction crew who'd become like family. Pete from the diner brought a cake. Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's teacher, stopped by with a gift. The house was full of people who'd watched this family form and had supported them through it. I want to make a toast, Margaret said, raising her glass. To families that choose each other. To people who see someone struggling and offer a hand instead of judgment. To love that builds homes out of courage and commitment rather than just tradition. Everyone raised their glasses, and Rachel felt Ethan's arm around her waist, solid and sure. That night, after everyone had left and both girls were asleep in their purple and silver bedroom, Rachel and Ethan sat in their favorite spot on the back porch. We did it, Rachel said. We actually pulled it off. We turned a lie into the truth. We didn't lie about what mattered, Ethan corrected, as he always did. We just accelerated the timeline. Rachel laughed. Is that what we're calling it? That's what I'm calling it. Because everything I told that judge was true. You and Sophie did need a home. I did have room. We did become partners. We did build a family. The only thing that was false was saying it had already happened when it was just about to happen. You're very good at rationalizing. I'm very good at recognizing the difference between legal truth and actual truth. Ethan pulled her closer. And the actual truth is that I love you. I love Sophie. I love the family we've created. I love that our daughters are sisters by choice. I love that we took something desperate and impossible and turned it into something beautiful. Rachel turned to face him. I love you too. And I've been thinking about something. What's that? About making this permanent, not just domestic partnership permanent, marriage permanent. Ethan's breath caught. Are you asking me to marry you? Maybe. Is that okay? Or were you planning some elaborate proposal? Rachel Moore, I have been planning how to propose to you for 3 months. I have a ring hidden in my sock drawer. I was going to take you to the place where we first met, the diner, and ask you there because that's where this whole crazy journey started. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. You have a ring? I have a ring. It was my grandmother's. Sarah never wore it because it wasn't her style, but I kept it thinking maybe Lucy would want it someday. But then you came into my life and I thought, maybe Lucy's future stepmom would want to wear her great-grandmother's ring. Can I see it? Ethan laughed. Now? You want me to get it now? Yes, right now. I've just semi-proposed to you. The least you can do is show me the ring. He came back a few minutes later with a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band with 3 small diamonds, elegant and understated and absolutely perfect. It's beautiful, Rachel whispered. So is that a yes? You'll marry me? On one condition. Name it. We tell our daughters that they were right all along, that they knew we belonged together before we did, that we were just being slow and stubborn. Ethan grinned. Deal. Though they're going to be insufferable about being right. Let them be insufferable. They earned it. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They sat there under the stars, engaged and in love, and marveling at the journey that had brought them here. They were married 3 months later in the backyard, surrounded by the people who'd become their family. Margaret officiated, having gotten certified online for the occasion. Both girls were flower girls, walking down the makeshift aisle together, spreading petals and giggling. Rachel wore a simple white dress she'd found at a consignment shop. Ethan wore a suit that Margaret had helped him pick out. The ceremony was short and sweet, focused on the promises they were making not just to each other, but to their daughters. I promise to show up, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. To pay attention to the small things. To choose you every single day, not just today. To be a father to both our daughters and a partner to you in building the life we want. I promise to let you help me, Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. To trust you with my heart, and my daughter, and my dreams. To build you up the way you've built me up. To remember that family is what we make it, and what we've made is beautiful. When they kissed, both girls cheered so loudly that several neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. The reception was a backyard barbecue with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Pete had closed the diner for the evening so all the staff could attend. Some of Ethan's clients came, people whose houses he'd built or renovated, who'd watched him transform from a grieving widower to a man fully alive again. Rachel danced with Ethan, then with Sophie, then with Lucy. She danced with Margaret and with David Chen and with Pete. She danced until her feet hurt and her cheeks ached from smiling. Late in the evening, she found Marcus standing at the edge of the yard, watching. She hadn't expected him to come. They'd invited him out of courtesy for Sophie's sake, but there he was. It's a nice party, he said when she approached. Thank you for coming. Sophie will be happy you're here. Marcus nodded, his eyes on Sophie and Lucy, who were doing some elaborate dance routine they'd clearly choreographed. She looks happy, happier than I've ever seen her. She is happy. You were right, you know, what you said during the home visit, about me not knowing her. Marcus's voice was quiet. I don't know her favorite color, or her teacher's name, or what she wants to be when she grows up, and that's not your fault. It's mine. Rachel didn't know what to say. I thought being a good father meant providing financially, making sure she had everything she needed materially. I didn't understand that what she needed was someone to pay attention. He finally looked at Rachel. Ethan pays attention. Even I can see that. It's not too late, Rachel said softly. If you want to know her, she's still your daughter. The adoption doesn't change that. I think it does, actually, but maybe that's okay. Maybe she's better off with a father who actually wants to be one. Marcus pulled an envelope from his pocket. This is for you. Wedding gift. Inside was a check for $50,000. Marcus, I can't. It's not charity. It's child support I should have been paying all along. Use it for Sophie's college fund, or for law school if you still want to go, or just to make your life easier." He managed a small smile. "Consider it my way of acknowledging that you were the better parent all along." He left before Rachel could respond, and she stood there holding the check, watching him walk away from his daughter's life with what looked like relief. "You okay?" Ethan appeared beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Yeah. Marcus just gave us money for Sophie's college fund, and maybe tacitly admitted he was never cut out to be a father. That must have been hard for him." "Probably, but I think it was also freeing. He gets to stop pretending he wants to be involved. We get to stop pretending he's actually a parent, and Sophie gets to grow up with a father who chose her." Rachel leaned into Ethan. "She gets you." "We all get each other," Ethan corrected. "That's the whole point." The party wound down as the evening turned to night. Guests left with full stomachs and warm hearts, promising to visit soon. The girls finally crashed, exhausted from dancing and excitement, curled up together in their room. Rachel and Ethan stood in the kitchen, surveying the aftermath of the celebration. Dishes everywhere, half-eaten cake on the counter, flowers wilting slightly in their vases. "We should clean this up," Rachel said without moving. "We should," Ethan agreed, also not moving. They looked at each other and started laughing. "Tomorrow," Rachel decided. "We'll clean tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Ethan agreed. They went upstairs to check on the girls one more time. Sophie and Lucy were tangled together in Lucy's bottom bunk, still in their flower girl dresses, looking like angels. On the wall above them, they'd hung their family tree project, the one they'd made months ago, updated now to show Ethan as dad and Rachel as mom, with both girls connected by a single line labeled "Sisters Forever." "They knew," Rachel whispered. "They knew before we did that this was how it would end." "Kids always know," Ethan said. "They see what adults are too scared to acknowledge." They stood there for a moment, watching their daughter sleep, marveling at the family they'd built from nothing but desperation and hope, and the radical choice to help a stranger. In their own room, Rachel changed out of her wedding dress and into comfortable pajamas. Ethan did the same, and they crawled into bed together, exhausted and happy and married. "Mrs. Brooks," Ethan said, testing out the name. "I'm keeping more professionally," Rachel reminded him. "Rachel Moore Brooks for legal stuff. But you can call me Mrs. Brooks if you want." "Mrs. Brooks, how does it feel to be married to a man you met because you were homeless and desperate?" Rachel considered this. "It feels like the best decision I ever made was accepting help from a stranger in a diner parking lot. It feels like sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. It feels like our daughters were smarter than both of us combined." "All true." Ethan pulled her close. "It also feels like coming home, doesn't it? Like we were both lost and found each other." "Yes," Rachel whispered. "Exactly like that." They fell asleep holding each other, two people who'd started as strangers and become partners, lovers, parents, spouses. Two people who'd taken a lie told in desperation and transformed it into the truest thing in their lives. In the morning, they'd wake up to pancakes and chaos and two girls planning elaborate adventures. They'd clean up from the wedding and argue about whether to frame certain photos and negotiate who had to do the dishes. They'd live their beautifully ordinary life, built on the extraordinary foundation of choosing each other when they had every reason not to. But for now, they slept peacefully in the house that had become a home, surrounded by the family they'd created from courage and compassion and the simple belief that sometimes the right thing looks nothing like you expected. And that was how Rachel Moore, who'd once had nothing but a car and a daughter and 12 hours to save her family, ended up with everything she'd never known she needed. Not because someone rescued her, but because someone saw her struggling and offered a hand. Not because she was weak, but because she was brave enough to accept help. Not because the system worked, but because two people decided to work together to beat a system that was designed to fail them both. She ended up with a home, a partner, a family, and a future, all built on the foundation of one impossible night when a stranger made an offer that changed everything. And if that wasn't a happy ending, Rachel didn't know what was.